At the outset of my divorce trial, I found myself standing before a judge who appeared to be of advanced age, perhaps even on the precipice of retirement. As I took in her weathered features and stern countenance, a sense of trepidation gripped me, and I feared that she would be entirely unsympathetic to my plight, denying me the opportunity to present my side of the story. Despite the fact that my lawyer had amassed a substantial body of evidence attesting to my wife's infidelity, he made the strategic decision not to rely too heavily upon it. The admissibility and weight given to such evidence were ultimately at the discretion of the judge, who could choose to consider it or dismiss it as an unwarranted intrusion into personal privacy. As my wife made her entrance into the courtroom, she was accompanied by an imposing entourage of supporters, each one seemingly hand-picked to create an impression of unwavering solidarity. Her father-in-law and mother-in-law stood resolutely by her side, their presence a testament to their loyalty. Her sister and brother-in-law, aunt and uncle, and cousin and his wife formed a formidable phalanx of familial support. A gaggle of close girlfriends rounded out the group, their presence a tacit endorsement of my wife's character. In a calculated move designed to tug at the heartstrings, they had even brought along my wife's young nephew, his cherubic face a reminder of the innocence caught in the crosshairs of our marital strife. I couldn't help but marvel at the fact that she hadn't invited one of her lovers to join the spectacle, especially considering the revelation that she had been carrying on with 3 different men. At this point, I wouldn't have been surprised if she had even brought our family cat to complete the tableau of domestic harmony. In stark contrast to my wife's robust support system, I found myself standing alone, a solitary figure in the face of adversity. I had naively believed that we were a cohesive family unit, but the reality of the situation laid bare the depths of my misapprehension. However, I had long ago learned to rely solely on my own strength and resourcefulness, having been accustomed to navigating life's challenges without the luxury of a support network since my earliest childhood days. As the trial commenced, a procession of speeches and arguments filled the courtroom, each one carefully crafted to sway the judge's opinion. When my turn arrived, I chose to speak plainly and directly, declaring in no uncertain terms that I had no intention of continuing to share my life with a person who had so thoroughly betrayed my trust and deceived me at every turn. Through my wife's testimony, I was subjected to a litany of unflattering accusations and character assassinations. She painted a picture of me as a woefully inadequate lover, claiming that in the entirety of our 6-year marriage, she had never once experienced the heights of orgasmic bliss. She portrayed me as a financial deadbeat, alleging that I routinely withheld my salary from the household coffers. She spun tales of my supposed drinking and carousing, even going so far as to suggest that I had raised a hand to her in violence. According to her narrative, I was a man who shirked all domestic responsibilities, refusing to lift a finger to assist with household chores or the care of our child. In short, she presented me as a worthless excuse for a husband and a human being, a man devoid of any redeeming qualities. As the judge took center stage, I steeled myself for what was to come, expecting the worst given the damning portrait my wife had painted. However, what transpired next left me somewhat stunned. The judge inquired about the possibility of a reconciliation period, to which my wife responded in the affirmative, likely in an attempt to portray herself as the aggrieved party willing to work towards a resolution. I, on the other hand, firmly declined, unwilling to subject myself to further emotional torment. The judge expressed a measure of astonishment at the fact that my wife had managed to tolerate my alleged shortcomings for an entire 6 years. She posed a series of pointed questions, probing the inconsistencies in my wife's narrative. Why, she asked, had my wife not sought a divorce sooner, if I was truly the monster she claimed? How could she reconcile the fact that our child, whom I had supposedly neglected, eagerly engaged in play with me, a fact the judge herself had witnessed in the hallway outside the courtroom? And why, if I was indeed a person of such little worth, should my wife be compelled to dedicate a month and a half to reconciliation efforts, even though the law mandated such a time frame? As the judge's incisive questioning cut through the web of lies and half-truths, my wife's supporters erupted into a cacophony of protest, their voices rising in a desperate attempt to drown out the truth. The judge, however, was having none of it. With a sharp reprimand, she swiftly silenced the unruly bunch, leveling a particularly stern warning at my mother-in-law. If she heard so much as another peep from her, the judge vowed, she would have no choice but to clear the courtroom of all relatives and acquaintances. In the face of the judge's unwavering authority, No one dared to challenge her or answer her probing questions. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to entertain the possibility that custody of our child might be awarded to me, given the apparent holes in my wife's story. However, my hopes were quickly dashed. In the end, the judge ruled that the child was to remain with the mother, though I was granted extensive visitation rights, including holidays, weekends, and birthdays. I couldn't help but feel a measure of surprise at the judge's apparent inclination to side with me, even if only to a degree. I found myself wondering what had ultimately swayed her decision. Perhaps it was the overwhelming evidence of my wife's infidelity, meticulously documented through a trail of incriminating conversations, videos, and photographs. Or maybe it was the composed and respectful demeanor I had maintained throughout the proceedings, in contrast to the histrionics displayed by my wife's supporters. Regardless of the underlying reasons, the final outcome was the dissolution of our marriage. My wife, perhaps sensing the futility of further legal wrangling, chose not to file an appeal. In a rare moment of amicability, we had managed to divide our assets in advance of the trial. I walked away with the garage and little else, while my wife was awarded a one-bedroom apartment, a car, and a small household goods store. In a postscript to the saga, I later learned that one of my wife's lovers had managed to wrest control of the store from her through some underhanded machinations. Despite her best efforts to reclaim what was rightfully hers, she had sued him twice and lost both cases. As for the second lover, he had apparently totaled the car she had been awarded in the divorce settlement. Currently, she is living with the third man in her life, though I use the term currently with a measure of skepticism. Through the grapevine, I have come to understand that their relationship is far from stable, rife with the same patterns of deceit and dysfunction that characterized our own marriage. And so, I find myself waiting with a mixture of morbid curiosity and resignation for the inevitable news of yet another upheaval in her life, the final denouement in a sordid tale of love, betrayal, and the inescapable consequences of one's choices.